From multiple rescheduled locations in Minneapolis or near enough, this is Nice Games Club, the show where nice game devs talk gaming and game development.
I'm Martha McGarry, and I make nice games.
I'm Steven McGregor, and I make nice games.
And I'm Arthur Croy. I too make nice games. For this year's GDC special, your nice hosts talk about the largest gathering for game developers that wasn't. And so, if everyone's ready, let's start.
I liked your hand motions there, Mark.
Yeah. I have to cue the remainder of your nice hosts because we're recording this episode differently than we normally do. And so I was the only one who heard the theme song just there.
Yeah, it was real weird. It was so quiet.
Yes.
I'm glad we were still able to get the rhythm down. At least I hope.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Listeners will be the judge of that. So like everything else in the world, we're doing things a little differently now. It's a virtual clubhouse. So we're each recording from our own homes. Rather than from the clubhouse, which has actually been recently relocated to my home, so it's not that much different from me. But we should talk a little bit about sort of our new normal, because we really can't avoid it. This is not a show that is about those things, but everything's about that right now.
Yeah,
that's true.
Right?
It's kind of our whole life.
It's a lot. It changes a lot of things. Like, I guess, like this whole, I don't know. How should we frame this? Like, if you were to listen to this 5 years in the future, maybe, I don't know, you're a 5-year-old and you're like, I'm 5 and what is this?
And you're listening to Nice Games Club?
I guess. I don't know. They really want to be game devs when they grow up.
Uh-huh.
Maybe we should frame, like, what is this happening right now?
Sure.
You want to say pandemic
it is kind of interesting.
going on.
Yeah. Like, I think when there's big news, there tends to be a kind of assumption that everyone knows what's going on.
Right.
But especially now, it is because it is affecting every person on the planet. But you're right. Years from now, certainly our show is one that is back catalog friendly.
Mm-hmm.
So it does benefit us to actually recap.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Stephen.
So yeah, basically there's a virus going around. Called COVID-19. It's very hazardous and it's causing a lot of issues. I think we talked about it in the previous Nice Games Bulletin. I don't think
we've mentioned it on every episode the last 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Oh, well, there we go.
But with it's different each time.
Yeah.
Things are moving very fast.
Yeah. It happened really quickly, and it's spreading to the point, particularly in the United States, it's spreading to the point where everybody is practicing social distancing. So they're working from home and they're not going out to bars or restaurants. And they're just going maybe to get food from the store, or maybe walk around, but like trying to avoid other humans so they don't spread the disease accidentally. Yeah.
So because this is our GDC special, what we do every year is we record it right after one or more of us gets back from the show, and then we try to put out the episode as soon as possible, the next day or so.
Right.
We're doing that again now, even though there was no GDC. So listeners who listen to us as new episodes come out, this is what we talk about here is going to be the reality for you, or close enough. It's going to be a day or two away. Things do change very quickly now.
Things could move very quickly.
Yeah.
But I was editing an episode recently in the past week or so, and what we were talking about then, only a few weeks ago, is already, not that we didn't see the path that was coming, but I think it's just so different. Things are so different. So, we're not going to change our schedule to try to be more timely, but I think it will be kind of interesting, I think, when people do hear our episodes and think like, oh, that's what we all thought, and that's what the world was 2 weeks ago. I hope that there's actually some value to that, because it's easy to forget how fast things move. When your new normal is, every couple of days, you have to completely update it. Where we're sitting now, we're recording this on March 22nd, 2020. We don't normally even ever mention the days we record, but that is sort of relevant here.
Mm-hmm.
The schools have been closed. So my mom is home now. And I think restaurants aren't supposed to do sit-in service, so you can go pick up stuff from them, but you can't.
Yeah. So earlier this week, Dale and I celebrated our 21 years together.
Aww.
So, confetti over that. And the past couple of years, we just go to Noodles and Company and get noodles and then watch Star Trek in bed. It's like a really chill tradition we have. Mm-hmm. And that was earlier this week, or almost a week ago. and the noodles we were in was shut down. You could pick up. And even then I was thinking like, oh, some businesses are doing this now. But now it is every restaurant.
Yeah.
Right?
I think so.
And we're all stuck at home, so we actually don't know, right?
Right. That's true. It's really weird. Like you're not constantly. Well, I guess some people are constantly interacting with people. It's not like we don't have Twitter and social media and stuff.
Yeah.
But like if you're not on those things, you don't get news information.
Right. Right.
Or at least, yeah. Like for me, I would oftentimes get a lot of like information from like coworkers and stuff. And so, and I don't interact with coworkers nearly as much since I'm also working from home. And it's weird that like I'm kind of secluded from the news in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, I get all my news now from news sources. I no longer hear from people or see anything out in the world. You know, like I don't know if there's the restaurants in my neighborhood are fully closed or not. I can just assume they are, right? Or that they only do takeout or whatever. But what about the ones that don't do takeout? Are they holding off? And you know, like there's just so much is happening at granular level that you can't really hold all of it. So you have to make a lot of assumptions. And of course, you just have to take in the news that's relevant to you in order to sort of stay sane, I guess.
Right. Yeah, basically. Yeah, like there's a lot of things happening. So like, yeah, just focusing on the things that pertain to you is helpful, especially since like, you know, it can be scary to consider what might happen in the future, in the near future. I don't know. It's wild. It's really weird too, like watching TV and stuff. Watching new shows, like shows that are coming out like this week or whatever, because like
they're all shot in July last year or something.
Yeah, because they're all like, you know, people are acting normally, so they're like, you know, walking around and interacting with people and giving people hugs and high fives and kisses and touching on the face and stuff, and it's like,
what are you doing? You fools!
Yeah,
it's coming for you.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is, you know, there's a certain every now and again a TV show will predict some timely event. Like they all shoot months before they air, so like sometimes they'll be like, oh, we'll do an episode about the Olympics, and then like just crossing their fingers that the Olympics doesn't get canceled, you know?
Right.
Like, but I mean, the Olympics are going to get canceled this year, you guys.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't mean to pull that example out of a hat, but I'm really fascinated by how we will respond as a culture to this, because you know, if something, you know, when tragedies happen, when horrible things happen, when wars happen, you can kind of be like, there's a part of the world it doesn't touch, so it's not weird that like this TV show that takes place across spring 2020 isn't addressing something, right? Yeah. You can kind of let that, you can be like, okay, I'm sure, you know, we don't need to worry about that being, but like now it's such a universal experience that I wonder how people will react to it. What are, will culture, for sensitivity reasons, avoid it? Not trying to say, you know, not trying to do something that is insensitive or glib, or will our culture just be all about this for the next couple of years? As you know, ultimately, even if we come through it at the end of the summer, you know, it's still going to be something that we talk about for years.
Right. Yeah. Right? It kind of reminds me of a comic book movie or TV show where like a large event actually the Marvel's movies specifically. Yeah. Like, you know, there's the big when those aliens invaded New York in the first Avengers movie or whatever. Like everybody references. Yeah, we were all there for that. Like everybody references it in future movies, and they don't like describe it because like everybody, they assume that you have seen that movie.
You know what's funny about that example is that there are people will complain very frequently that they don't mention it enough in later films.
Oh.
Because they talk about the magnitude of that, and then like Ant-Man or something doesn't really talk about it.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't make any sense, right? Yeah. But of course, you can't make a movie that's just all about that forever, even though our culture would be all about that forever.
Yeah.
So now that we have something that is, it's not aliens invading, but
right.
it is something that is
viruses
universal.
Are pretty alien-like to me.
That's true. And I mean, the thing about it that makes it not just universal, but universally scary is that government response has been lacking to various degrees all across the world, and there's no vaccine for it yet, and so there's a lot of unknowns, and we will know those facts as they come. But it'll be weird to not talk about it.
Yes, yeah, it will be weird. It would be weird to not talk about it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the direction we'll be headed in. I don't know.
Yeah. And I mean, is this something that games will address? I mean, games are not good at this kind of thing.
No.
That address, even the games that are ostensibly anti-war don't talk about the real world, right? And so games that have political messages or talk about world events tend to come at them sort of perpendicular.
Sure.
Unless it's World War II, and then where the sort of... we've sort of baked in the fault lines on that one.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting how people, especially small indie developers, art projects, things that are for free on itch. I expect a ton of interesting works come from this period and from people's experiences.
Pandemic clones.
Well, yes, people. right. There will be probably a lot of people. I don't think this is what you meant, but capitalizing on everybody's state of mind, right? Not necessarily in a predatory way, but in a way that is maybe less about having something to say and more catching the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not what I was trying to say, but yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's wild. It's wild. There's a lot of ways this could go, and I'm looking forward to the future so that we're not here.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and so I have this urban divination deck that I got just for funsies, and today I did a reading, and for the present I pulled the raccoon, which means reclusive and resourceful. Which fits. And for the future, I pulled the crow, which are all very social and very loud. So in the future, we're going to be very social and very loud.
Looking forward to our noisy future. That's great. Well, this is not a show about that, but I think we all kind of agreed we want to talk about it. And we'll talk about it at the top of every show going forward for a little while. When there's something to talk about.
Yeah.
But let's get into the meat of what this episode is about, which is the GDC that didn't happen. It's a weird topic, but we've been doing GDC specials. This is our fourth since, or was it third? Was this? This is our fourth.
I think it is.
Yeah, we've been doing this for the last four GDCs, and previous episodes have had different formats. So, Martha, you did interviews on Train Jam. I think the first GDC special we did.
Yeah, and we did two specials that year because
that's right. It was very ambitious.
There was a lot of us in San Francisco at the time. So
that's right. You and your boyfriend Dylan and I were all we did an episode together. And was Dale on that episode? I don't think she
was there.
I don't think she was there either.
Yeah.
The last year, Dale and I were together, and we were both on the episode. And we always recap interesting sessions, news from the show, what the expo's like, what's different from last year. This is totally different. It's we're just talking about a couple of pieces of news that have a different context now.
Yeah.
And I had a couple of meetings where I did some pitches. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But the first thing is how GDC responded to the cancellation, which we've talked about in previous episodes, kind of the step-by-step cancellation that happened. But what they announced as a replacement is to say, the people who are going to be doing some talks, if they record their talks at home, we will stream them on Twitch for free. And so a much reduced schedule, but a bunch of free GDC talks, which is actually kind of great. Did you guys watch any of them?
I haven't yet, but I'm planning to after we record.
Yeah, I don't even know where you access those.
It's just the GDC's Twitch account and then their YouTube page. So like everything that goes on Twitch, it appears on YouTube 2 days later.
Right.
So you can find it there. We'll put links in the show notes so that you too can find them.
Yeah.
But I only watched like maybe 3 of the talks, like 2 on Monday and 1 on Wednesday or something. And partly it's because they're immediately available to watch later. The urgency was totally sapped from it. Mm-hmm. The fact that they were there is interesting. Yeah. And it's something that like I could totally see people demanding next year that these things get live streamed, even when it is, at Moscone Center.
Yes, I think that would be really great and really good for making GDC more accessible. Plus, the cameras are already running, so
yes,
it's not like it would be extra setup, but it would be less of a ask than than if they had nothing at all.
Yeah, and for people who've watched the in the GDC Vault where they put all the talks, and then on YouTube they put, I would say, I'm just guessing, but something like 20 to 30% of the talks, maybe more even, go on YouTube eventually a month later for free. So there's tons of GDC content available for free already, but they don't edit those. They just turn the camera on for 45 minutes and turn them off. Right. So I don't know how hard it would be to live stream a lot of that stuff, particularly because they've already shown a willingness, not just this week, but in prior years, to distributing a lot of that content. That's going to be a conversation. I'm sure that because I'm sure they would love, I'm sure, to give away all that content, but that is why people pay to go. So it's going to be kind of an interesting question for them.
I was going to say, I don't know that GDC is interested in streaming the content largely because, a lot of the reason, like you said, Mark, a lot of the reason why people pay to go to GDC is to see the content or to get access to the content early. A year early, so it's a significant amount of time, and so I don't know how likely they would be to want to stream things unless there was such a giant ask and demand from the audience for that to happen. It makes sense for this year, right? But I don't know that they will continue to do this next year.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. But in the meantime, there is something else that GDC is doing, which is something they call GDC Summer.
Right.
This was announced a couple of days ago. And it kind of, everybody who was eating up all the news about GDC, not everybody caught this news, I think. It seemed kind of just because when they canceled the event, they said, they never called it a cancellation. They said, we're postponing it.
Right.
And everyone was like, yeah, sure. Right. And so ultimately, they did what they said they were going to do. They're rescheduling a smaller event for first week of August, I think, thereabouts. 3 days, a 2-day expo, so smaller. Mm-hmm. And then fewer talks, and just because they don't have a lot of time to put it together. And they're still planning on doing a full GDC next year. Mm. But the question is August too early to be asking everybody to buy plane tickets?
I loved, there was a joke on the Slack that was very, very good, the MSP Game Dev Slack. And someone was like, don't you think August is a little too optimistic? And then August, friend of the show, August, was like, August is a little too optimistic. It's very good.
Yeah. No, that's the exact right response. It's like, oh, wait a minute. And their press release included a little we're going to continue to monitor this. But the truth, people make GDC plans well in advance. So right. I'm sure they didn't want to put it to October. This was probably just they felt like this was their best option. And, who's to say that June rolls around and life begins again and this isn't totally fine and enough for people to plan. So now it would be a good time to announce it and, move it later, I guess. But I don't know. It just seems like I don't know how much they would lose by just giving up, but it seems really, really, a lot of people I can imagine are just not interested in taking the risk of even looking into travel plans, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it does feel very soon. I guess I actually probably could go to this one now that I have more time to earn money to go to it. And I don't know how I don't know how confident I am that things are going to be better in August. So if things were to not get better by August, then I will have spent a bunch of money for nothing,
Right, get that travel insurance, which a lot of us did not get for this last week.
Yeah, that would I don't know. I've been thinking about it though. Like I have been I would like to go to a GDC again. I haven't gone to a GDC in maybe 4 years. It might have been 4 years.
Yeah.
Maybe since the first time we recorded one. And so like I would like to go again, but I don't know that I want to go for this August one. Even if everything ended up being good, like it wouldn't be the same experience. I imagine.
I mean, it would be different, right?
It would be different.
And listeners remember the ancient times of 2 or 3 weeks ago when we talked about my plans to be in San Francisco last week,
right?
For sort of a lot of the alternate events that were happening, because at that time it still seemed like a feasible option, especially because there just were not going to be as many people there, right? So you could distance yourself a little bit. But step by step, every one of those things got canceled. And even after GDC itself got canceled, and then even after Train Jam got canceled, and then my plans were kaput, all of the sort of smaller events, very small events that were going to be held mostly for among locals, and because they'd already booked a space, and like, all right, only a tenth of the people will come, but we'll still do it. One by one, those all got canceled too. Mm-hmm. And so, but that idea of the sort of this alternate GDC, this unique one-time experience, that's kind of the dreams back, right? GDC Summer is that.
Yeah, okay.
Right?
That's true.
I mean, I've been to the show for the past couple of years, so it has a unique appeal to me as like this sort of unique thing. But if you haven't been for a while, then I could totally see why it's not that interesting to you.
Right.
Right?
I see where you're coming from, though. Yeah, it will be that's what you meant by a different experience. It will be it will be a different thing, and maybe because like the people who are going are like, I don't know, hardcore GDC goers. Right. There'll be some camaraderie between all of them, and then maybe you can establish more intimate relationships with people in a way that like would be good for your indie development stuff.
Yeah. Plus it's a lot cheaper. Like the passes are maybe a third of the price. Well, less
than that even.
Less than that?
Yeah, I mean it's still too expensive.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But it's not as bad as the, I can't imagine. I forgot the number. It's so big that it normally costs.
It's over $2,000 that usually costs, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is just a staggering amount.
Yeah. I mean, I got to avoid like people are waiting for refunds, I think, still. But I got to avoid that because I got a press pad for Nice Games Club for this year. A lot of good that did me, but I don't know that I would want to pay that much again. I think I do recommend, I've recommended in years past that like if you can swing it, like going once, and like yes, it's a waste of money, but like it is a unique experience, and if it's once in your life, then that is I wouldn't. I mean, it's such a stupid amount of money. But I've gone every year, but I would not pay the full price every year. There's no justification for that.
Yeah. If you can manage to get an indie pass, those seem like a good.
Yeah, they do offer.
They're still expensive, but
yeah, they do offer lesser passes, right? And those get more appealing the more years you go, right?
Yes.
Well, here's an interesting question: are they offering press passes for the GDC Summer?
Well, I found out about GDC Summer through the press mailing list.
Okay.
So I'm going to make that inquiry.
Okay, cool. Let me know and I'll apply with you.
Yeah.
Yes. Maybe we can all go.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is sort of interesting because next year they're still going to do a full show next year. So that's
what's really surprising me about it too, is like they're doing this smaller thing and then 6-7 months later doing the main thing again. That's big. But
the weird thing is like Stephen, you were saying that it gives people the opportunity to do some business development.
Yeah.
That's what GDC is to me now. Like that's the value it has for me. As much as we've talked in years past about how I love conferences for the talks. That's now pure entertainment for me at this stage.
Yeah.
And one of the things they said in their announcement for GDC Summer is that they're going to focus on providing meeting spaces and matchmaking more than they have in the past. But they've been very unspecific about what they mean by that.
Yeah.
But the thing is I've said it on the show. I've been very critical of GDC itself their efforts in this area.
Right.
You have to go to outside organizations, outside events, different online systems, or you got to just cold email people and say, hey, can we meet at a Starbucks? That's where a lot of the business gets done at GDC. And it's weird that GDC is not involved in a lot of that. Mm-hmm. And it seems like this, as a smaller event, maybe this seems to be like a good way to give it some unique value. But for someone like me, for a smaller indie, where it's like, this is the time I can get these meetings because they're easier to get when someone has blocked their whole week for them instead of just, sending an email and crossing your fingers. Having another shot at it is kind of exciting.
Yeah,
right.
That's true.
But it's going to depend on how many of these like publishers, platform holders, and stakeholders and service providers, all these people who you'd want to meet with, are they going to be going to this thing?
Yeah.
I don't know. Do they see a big value in it?
Right.
They all just had a bunch of meetings over Skype, and they're probably like, this was fine. We didn't have to pay for airfare, right?
Yeah, it's
maybe
very possible.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, I mean, in the meantime, there were still GDC didn't happen, but there were still award shows that happened in spite of that. What's it? International. Let me look it up really quick.
Is that IGF? Is the international? Or you got me turned around. Independent Games Festival.
Independent Games Festival. Yes, a short hike one.
And then the other one that I forgot
is the Game Developer Choice Awards.
Right.
Where Untitled Goose Games won the Game of the Year.
Yeah.
So
I talked over you when you said a short hike won IGF, right?
Yes, it did. I've got a couple of details here. There's the Excellence in Audio Award winner is Mutazone. That's that's the game that we were talking about in another previous episode.
It makes total sense. The music and sound design for that game is just so good.
Yeah.
And then in Excellence in Visual Art, Knights and Bikes won. And I know, Mark, you were talking about that game. Yeah.
Yeah, I met the designer at a previous GDC and chatted with him after one of his talks. And this was well before the game was out. And that game didn't do very well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but it's such a shame because it deserved a lot more attention, and especially its art style,
right?
Which at first glance doesn't seem that special, but the closer you look at it, you realize the absolute like care and precision that went into the design of that game, the visual design of that game. So I'm very pleased that it got some love there.
Yeah, that's good. Mm-hmm. And then for the Game Developers Choice Awards, Vader Immortal won Best VR Game? I don't know what that is.
That is a Star Wars.
It's
kind of a narrative thing. It has a couple episodes where you are like an apprentice to Darth Vader. It's very branded. I played the first part. It's fine.
Okay.
It's okay.
Well, it won an award, so other people
good for it, I guess.
Better than fine. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then the best mobile game went to What the Golf.
Hey, that's cool.
Hey.
Yeah,
it does. It is. I played that on PC and it's available on console. But I didn't even realize that it was a mobile game. But of course, because it's like Angry Birds controls. So like,
it's cool. I'm glad that like we were still able to have an award ceremony for these people, even though the GDC didn't happen.
We had some friends of the show have a game up for the IGF awards, right?
Yes.
Anodyne 2.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Our pal Marina, it was for the grand prize, which is a really amazing nomination for a game of that scope.
Woo woo. So what were these meetings like that you had, Mark? I know you still had some meetings virtually with some publishers or whoever.
Yes. So this year, I'm pitching Metro Nexus, which longtime listeners know quite a lot about. And I had set up a couple of meetings for GDC prior to the event. And as things were getting canceled, I was saying like, I might still be in San Francisco. If that's true for you, let's keep our meeting, but hold it somewhere else. And then some of those meetings were still on for a little while. And then then Training Jam got canceled. And then I was like, okay, I'm not going to be in San Francisco anymore. Mm-hmm. And more than one were like, I still am. And then later was like, I'm not either. And they're just meetings over Skype. They're really not that different. But I took another meeting other than those from someone selling a service. And so that was kind of interesting, localization service. We're looking to add languages to Widget Satchel. And so I was like, sure, I'll hear your pitch. So I got pitched too, which was kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, kind of interesting. I had to prepare more materials than I was used to because there was, I wanted to be more confident that I was leaving behind more of my pitch than I was giving.
Okay.
And so my pitch deck was a little bit more detailed. I put a little bit more time into the visuals of it. Because I wouldn't have any printed copies or last year I did flyers for Widget Satchel, and that was really, really effective.
Yeah.
Because they got to be relatively short, so they weren't demanding to read. And then I included a thumb drive that had a build. And so it was a little package that I left. So it's kind of like just an oversized business card. And that was really an effective tool. But doing it this way was a little different. So I don't know. I'm still kind of new to all this anyway. So it's hard to know.
Yeah. Like what is new because you're doing it remotely, and what is new because it's just figuring out how this all works is confusing.
And, interestingly, I was pitching Widget Satchel last year, and that went pretty well. We got an Eastern publisher out of it, but a lot of my conversations about Metro Nexus are very different. So Widget Satchel was a game that when I was pitching it, I was saying, we don't need completion funds. The game isn't finished, but the scope is locked. So if you play the demo and you find it underwhelming, then thank you for meeting with me. But we're not going to expand the scope. I'm not interested in working another year on it. I was very upfront about that, and hopefully that was beneficial to those conversations. But with Metro Nexus, this is a totally different story. I'm a little bit more interested in funding for myself and for other development help. Metro Nexus is designed with these different art styles and all the different worlds, and those I want to hire artists to create them, like a wide variety of people, and so I need some money for that. I'm interested in doing online multiplayer, which is something that is a much larger scope than I had planned originally for that game, but feels more, if I'm going to make a budget, I want to include that.
Yeah.
And then my timeline is much different. Is that game was certainly not going to be finished in one calendar year. It'll take longer than that, regardless of how well funded it is. And so all the things I pitched about Widget Satchel, none of them are true for Metro Nexus, or very few of them are. And so it did feel like starting over, and that caught me off guard a little bit.
Okay.
I'm like, I know how to do this. I'm getting better at this. And then somebody's like, oh no, everything is different. It's a totally different conversation.
Sure. Well, you do have a shipped game, right? You have a game shipped on Steam and shipped in Japan. Is it out in Japan yet?
It's coming.
Okay.
It's coming. It passed lot check. It's through. It's
oh, beautiful.
It's waiting on, a little marketing effort and a button to be pressed. So
okay, well that's
good.
Yeah, it's pretty close. But that's news, I guess. But
well, those things you can use during your pitch deck to say, you could say from the creators of Widget Satchel, and then they can look it up and go, oh, this is a game that exists, and you can buy it. Well, I think you're a little ahead of the curve in that way.
No, you're absolutely right. That was something that when writing my pitch materials, how I present myself as a developer and how I present my little studio as a studio, very different from how I did it in previous years. Whereas in previous years, it was about it's pitching it as a concept. It's pitching myself as an artist and my history in other media, because I have a career prior to games. That is that's all the notoriety I could convince somebody I have comes from that. So I need to leverage that in terms of pitching myself as a development studio, and to sort of have someone trust in my capabilities. And that's still part of my pitch, and I think that's part of maybe what's unique about pitching myself as a developer.
Yeah.
But it's now not the main thing, right? Now it's like, I'm a real studio. We've put out something, and we're putting out the next thing now.
Yeah.
It's much more. You see a lot of pitching advice that is make sure to talk about your past work, and it's most people Googling tips on how to pitch publishers are a little limited in that area, right?
Sure,
and that was
right.
All of the sort of rabbit holes I went down reading there's GDC talks all over about this, and I do recommend people check them out, because you get just through osmosis. If you just take watch 20 of these talks and read 100 of these articles and don't take anything as gospel, then you just know more about how it works, but it doesn't actually make you any more prepared necessarily to operate in that theater, if that makes sense. And so, but you got to get through that part to get to the next part, I guess.
Right.
So I'm finally there. But doing it over Skype is like, I just like sitting for 3 minutes before it starts, like at my desk, like thinking, okay, all right, am I calling them or are they calling me? Oh, I didn't clarify. Okay, whatever. I'll just wait 1 minute past and call.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't seem like I'm like on the dot, like all those weird, none of it matters. But like, you know, you're just sort of like, okay, I got my glass of water here in case my mouth gets dry. I'm like, okay, everything's cool. Dale knows not to rush in and interrupt me. Like, I turned the fan off, so it's not, it's like all those little, it's very much, whereas at GDC, it's like you're in a noisy hotel lobby and you're like, what? Here's my, okay. And then it's a great meeting. Like, none of them, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense. I can see how it is very different, especially like, you know, comparing that to GDC.
Yeah.
It's quite a different Peter. But like, I mean, here's hoping something comes from those. And you've got more lined up, right?
I've got more lined up, yeah. And I'm optimistic. But a lot of this timing is the fact that GDC is happening now. And so, you know, there are certain parts of Metro Nexus where I'm not super confident in the pitch that the publishers I pitch do. I have to ask for a little trust on certain elements, and then there are other components that are like proven. And I it's up to me to describe all of the play testing and the, you know, all of the, you know, we did user testing, and like a lot of stuff about that game is like really solid and very pitchable, but the scope of the game is a little bit bigger than that. And so I also have to say, but then these parts, you just have to go with me on the journey. Right. And so, you know, by the time I'm done with these other meetings, I'll be better at it, just in time to have not leveraged that being better at it in any of the meetings. But that's how it goes. Right.
Yeah.
And when we talked to August last year about pitching to publishers, it was, I remember a lot of what he said about just how like, yeah, they're optimistic too. Like you're not groveling before the feet of the king, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
It really feels like that. Mm. And you know, but they want to work with you, or they would like to work with you. Right. And if they don't, then it's not because you said the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily that your project is bad. It's like sometimes it's just not a right fit, right? Yeah. And like that's not a failure. That's actually ultimately maybe, you know, if you'd rolled the dice differently, you wouldn't have had that meeting and gotten that no. But you could have had the best pitch in the world, but it's like we're not doing those types of games now, or we have one like it, or your budget's too small for us, or like your budget's too big for us, or like you know, whatever. Like our time zone is so far from yours that we just tend not to work with people, and that, you know, little things like that you have no control over necessarily. Yeah. And you have no idea what those things are.
Right.
So the whole thing is crazy making.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't recommend it to anybody. I'm kidding.
No, meetings are good. They're just
stressful.
They're a little. It's a little It's a little bit. Your description of how all of that works reminds me of like dating.
Yeah, it's very much like that.
Yeah. Like you don't know whether or not this other person is gonna like you or not, but you have to put yourself out there. And, you know.
And you have to be honest, but you know they don't want to hear everything about you.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Yep.
That's exactly it.
Like you don't want to be. I mean, too honest is not the right phrase, but like there is such a thing as like too much candor.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You know. Yeah. It's very much like that. It's a good comparison.
Yep. Game dev dating.
Yep.
Hey, you know, we have this feedback form thing.
I don't believe you.
Working. No, it's
I've never heard of it on the show before.
No,
yeah, it seems like something that you would have mentioned if it was a real thing, Stephen.
You caught me. I just made it up. No, for real. It's cool. It's nicegames.club/feedback, and you can give us great feedback and help us improve the show. It's important. We want to iterate off of this feedback, so like we're looking for it. If you we just updated our feedback form too with our fancy new website. Mm-hmm. And so like you can give us a whole bunch of new information. Like you can tell us about you as a person, and like we can have a better understanding of who our audience is. Like if you want to detail your age and like how much of a game developer are you? Are you just a hobbyist? Are you looking to become a game developer? Those kinds of things would be great to hear from. So let us know what you think at nicegames.club/feedback.
right. So other things happened last week. And one of the things about our GDC episodes that we do is we talk about like the news that gets made, right?
Right.
And there was like less of that this year because there was like less of an audience for it, where it started out with like, we were going to do an event at GDC, and then, no, we can't now, but like we still have news to announce.
Yeah.
And then later it's like, no, we've decided not to announce anything. We'll wait on it until it makes more sense. And with everything in the whole world topsy-turvy, a lot of that will probably just go out as press releases. There'll be less of an effort. And so I'm interested to see like what games were going to be announced that didn't get announced.
Yeah.
Because it's not just developer news. A lot of it is consumer and industry news that makes its way to mainstream games press. And there seemed to be a little bit less of that because people are busy right now.
Well, and it makes sense too, because like in past years with GDC, like everybody in the field is looking at GDC and wondering what's going to happen. And so like it makes sense to make announcements now because people are, their ears are perked for such news. But it doesn't make much sense in the current environment to do that.
Right. Everything's up in the air. But two things did happen. Two big pieces of news happened that felt big enough to not bother putting away, I suppose. And they're about the new consoles. So I'm excited about it because I love new consoles. Xbox Series X, the silliest name in Xbox history, which is saying something.
Oh my God.
Right?
What is going on over there?
Like, I don't hate it. Like, people make fun of it, and I don't think it's that bad. But like, it is silly. Like,
it is.
Like, I don't mind that it's silly, I guess. But
they already did Xbox One X, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm confused.
Yeah. And they were like, okay, someone asked this question of them. There was Xbox One and then One S and One X. So this is the Series X. So does that mean that this generation of Xbox is called the Xbox Series? And the person was like, oh, no, it's just Xbox. And this one is the Series X. And then the person was like, okay. Like,
right.
like, I mean, I guess I'm not confused, but okay. Like, it doesn't really.
That's how you're going to name it. Yeah. It's
yeah. But what I was referring to is, so the way they did this is they invited a bunch of press and particularly YouTubers and streamers into the Microsoft labs in this like carefully staged living room where they had a bunch of prototype elements out, and they had a running console and a bunch of like an exploded view of the thing, and then they just let them do their own YouTube clips in this space. And then sat down for an interview at the discretion of that YouTuber. So it depended on how that person wanted to construct their content. So it's kind of interesting, actually. So you saw a lot of press write articles about this, and then you saw photos from this space, and then you actually just saw a lot of YouTube videos of this person wandering around like it was their living room. It's kind of interesting.
Well, that's really cool too, because like if you follow somebody whose opinion you tend to mesh with well, then like you could just see their content and they'll be like, this is what's cool about the Xbox Series X.
Yes. Yeah. And it's definitely a trend that companies are doing. Apple did something similar when they did the Mac Pro, the new Pro, like full like tower Mac that people have been waiting for 7 years. They didn't send anything to any established tech press. They only invited YouTubers to come in, people who are already like Mac fans, to do quote unquote reviews, and love them, but like they're not qualified to review hardware at that level.
Right.
And so what it does, it kind of just seeds to a friendly audience. So this is me being cynical about it, but Microsoft's doing the same thing here, where they invited a bunch of people who are enthusiasts, right?
Yeah.
Like the enthusiast, like not the hard hitting journalists of Polygon, which is like that in terms of the scale of hard-hitting journalists, that's not the highest, but like they take their work seriously. Which isn't to say that, a bunch of YouTubers and streamers don't, but they have a different goal, right? They're not journalists, and they don't claim to be. Yeah. And so it is kind of interesting to see some of them walk through all the tech specs, and you can kind of hear the bullet points from the press release just being like re-said in their voice. And this is not sponsored content. So a part of me is a little bit like a little grumpy about it, but it was cool to see a lot of the same information out. So people like, it was very well documented.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. Which is a far cry from what Sony did last week.
At least Sony has like understandable naming scheme. I have to give them that.
Yeah.
Right. But they did a thing which is a people saying it's supposed to be a GDC talk, but this is a thing they did for the PlayStation 4 also as a video they released. So I'm not sure how much different this is than what they were planning to do. But it's called The Road to PS5, and it was a system architecture breakdown. So when the PS4 was coming out, it was actually kind of an important thing for to tell even consumers, which is to say, we all know that the PS3 was hard to develop for, and it was supposedly a supercomputer, but it was very frequently underperformed Xbox 360 titles. So to gain your confidence, we'll get really into the nitty gritty on how we're building this PS4 to have like x86 architecture and familiar development schemes and like ways to sort of like let everyone know like how much different their hardware approach was this generation. So that's what that video was about, right? So the road to PS5 that they put out is Mark Cerny, who is the sort of head of hardware. He's also a game designer, and so he's a little bit of a do-it-all, which is kind of cool that they have that someone like that. He get really into the weeds, but also talking about big picture stuff. But it's just him giving a very, very dry presentation for an hour on the technical specs, and people were not having it. They were just not interested. It didn't serve the same purpose as the PS4 one did, and so I think that's why people reacted to it a little differently. But also, people were hot on the heels of like counting teraflops and of the Xbox Series X. And like people don't know. They don't know what this means, and nor should they. And so they just look at which number is bigger than the other number, and no amount of boring talk will save them from that impression, right?
Basically, yeah. Yeah, I watched a little bit of it, and like Mark Cerny he's very calming when he's talking in the video, which is really nice. But like, I am not a hardware person and did not understand most of what he was talking about. I did understand the effects it had towards development, though. I thought that was interesting, and so like I understood it from a game developer sort of perspective, but not as a computer hardware kind of person. I didn't understand any of those.
So you watched a little bit of it? Yeah,
just a smidge.
Martha, did you see any of it?
I did not get a chance to.
Did you have any interest?
I mean, the only reason I want a PS4 right now is for Dreams, which I hope someday comes to PC. So I wasn't that interested in looking at either of the consoles, actually, because we just don't use them very much.
Right.
There is some relevant information there, though, because like the PS5 is supposed to be backwards compatible.
Oh.
But I think what had happened was they said during this video that the PS5 was the top 100 games, most of them would be backwards compatible. I think, and then they just I think they described that incorrectly. They're basically saying most games are going to be backwards compatible, including most of the top 100 games on the PS5.
Yeah. So a fair amount of the presentation was Mark Cerny trying to preempt criticisms. So like, for example, the SSD in the Xbox Series X is 1 terabyte, right? The one in the PS5 is 825 gigabytes. So he did a whole preamble about like, we want a big hard drive so you don't have to reinstall. So we analyzed it and we figured this was the right number. We want to make sure we keep costs down. So it's this number. And really trying to like get ahead of the curve on some of these things. And talking about how like teraflops don't matter, and like I'm being kind of silly about it, but like I buy most of his explanations. The truth is the Xbox just computationally just has more power. It just does, right?
Yeah.
But they are different architectures in a way. Sony's has they offload all the audio processing to a separate processing unit, and so that can take up a lot of power in high level games. So, but it's apples and oranges at a certain point. They're both going to be ridiculously powerful. But the thing with backwards compatibility that was interesting to me was that people didn't quite understand what he meant, and I did. But then I was like, oh no, I got it wrong because of ultimately how convincing everybody's take on it was. So in the presentation, he describes the we're running at such a higher clock speed, so some games are going to have some trouble with it. So we have this legacy mode, and I know what that is because on a PlayStation 4 Pro, has what is called legacy mode for PlayStation 4 not Pro. And it's not a phrase they use in their marketing, but on the development side, I'm like, oh, I know what that is. I've heard of that before. I've looked at some of the documentation, so I know what that means. That means that PlayStation 4 launch games will run perfectly fine on a PS4 Pro, even though a PS4 Pro has 3 times as many teraflops, right, or whatever. And so, like Stephen, you know this. When you write code, like you have some expectation of how it's going to be run,
right?
And so you can't just throw hardware at it forever, and like. Better isn't always better, right? Mm-hmm. It can break things.
Well, it's like all those games that are really old that ran on like clock speed, had controlled game speed basically, and so now you try to play them on modern computers and they just go like infinitely fast because they're running. Right, yep. They weren't expecting to have a clock speed that fast.
Yeah. Mm. I don't know if either of you have done this, but I have definitely written code that waits for something, and it waits for it just in milliseconds because I know how long that thing takes.
Yeah.
Like, not because I want to run a series of checks, like to really see if it, like a bunch of callbacks and event listeners and stuff. Like, yeah. I'll do that when it matters, but sometimes I'm just like, this, once this many milliseconds goes by, I know I'm good. So I'm just going to put this many milliseconds on a timer and just do it. Yeah. It's like perfectly fine. And, those are the kinds of things that can get messed with. Yeah. And there's a lot of that in games and it's not being lazy, it's being efficient.
Right. Oh, yeah, for sure.
So legacy mode. So he's describing legacy mode and it's like, oh, I totally get it. So he's describing the PS5 has a legacy mode for PS4 Pro and a separate legacy mode for PS4. And I'm like, oh, great. So pretty much everything will run, right? Mm-hmm. And then he says that one line that you mentioned, which is, we tested the top 100 and almost all of them work. So, right. But we got to do case by case, whatever. And so everyone on the internet was like, are you kidding me? Less than 100 games are going to work with this thing? And I totally get why people thought that, right? Like this, some people were blaming it on it being a very dry talk, but frankly, I think he just wasn't clear enough. Yeah. But I was like, wait a minute, no, it's everything is compatible, but keep an eye on it, right? Isn't that what that means? And so I was like on Twitter and I like responded to someone like, did anybody actually watch the presentation? And then I went back and watched it and I'm like, oh no, I'm wrong. He clearly says that there's some sort of certification system or it's like the, and so like I was definitely overstating it. And then their clarification was like, oh no, I kind of had the right impression. Oh, but so they definitely wasn't very clear. And part of that is because no one knows what legacy mode means, right? Yeah. Like it's just because it's dry, but other times it's like, make it clear what you're saying. And they didn't do a really good job of that.
So, so legacy mode is basically emulating the older hardware.
No, it's it's like halfway between that and just running it normally. So, PlayStation 1 games, there was a PlayStation 1 emulator in the PlayStation 3 and the PlayStation 4, right? That is software emulation. Okay. Original Xbox games run on Xbox One, I think, through software emulation. But in the case of the PS5 and in the Xbox Series X, the backwards compatibility for the generation just prior is almost entirely because the software architecture is very, very similar. And so legacy mode basically turns off features and then artificially slows down things to provide an environment that would be similar if it was running natively. As far as I know, it's not a virtual machine or anything like that. I think that would probably be too much of an ask for PS4 games. I bet PS3 games could do it at this stage, even though they're very complicated and weird. Yeah, so it's kind of, and they didn't really explain any of that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's super interesting, though.
It is, and that's why I like these talks. Like, ultimately, I like new hardware because I like new hardware, like that, and I will get it because it's great, and I enjoy it. But truthfully, I'm much more interested in just learning about it. Like, if when the PlayStation 4 came out, and I got one for Watch Dogs, because Watch Dogs was going to be a launch title. And then Watch Dogs got delayed by 6 months, and it didn't bother me. Because, I just kind of liked the new toy, I suppose. And so part of that is, reading the manual and stuff like that. And so that was a big part of it. Martha, you should take a look at this talk, and freed from the knowledge that you have any consumer interest in it, you probably quite like hearing the details.
Okay.
I think you'd be into that sort of thing.
Awesome.
And Mark Cerny is like has this uncanny expression. It's kind of enjoyable to watch him talk.
It is though. It really is.
He's very cheerful, but you're like you gotta kind of have your hand on your wallet the whole time. You're like,
right. Mark Cerny, like, tell me when to give you money.
No. I mean that like it's like, is he the most trustworthy person ever? Or is he the best liar on earth?
Yeah. I see you're coming from that.
He's kind of. I don't know if that's fair, but he seems like a wonderful, wonderful person. Like for someone being in charge of the nerdy hardware part, he seems like the kind of warm personality. He's just weird and nerdy, which is like also I can get behind. So yeah, it's an interesting talk.
Yeah, I walked past him when I went to GDC.
Yeah.
Me and my brother did. We didn't say hi or anything. We just noticed it. And then me and Charles looked at each other like, is that Mark Cerny? Yeah,
that's Mark Cerny.
That's awesome. Yeah. The one really interesting part of the talk that I won't be able to do justice for, but I do want to mention, is about the solid state hard drive. And that's something that both Microsoft and Sony announced last year, that their next gen is going to have that all shipping consoles will have an SSD. And like PC gamers are like, who cares? And console gamers are like, why does this matter? Mm-hmm. And then some people are like thinking like, well, they say it matters, so it must be the most important thing ever. And the talk really goes into why it's important. Like Microsoft has not done a good enough job explaining why having much faster access to assets is going to be valuable in this next generation. Right. Like, you know, Steven, you and I, the games that we make, you can load them all into RAM. Like, yeah, right. Like, we don't need to worry about read access so much. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, we have ambitions perhaps to make games that are a little more demanding than that. But to hear him talk about, like in Spider-Man, the one mailbox model you saw hundreds of times in New York City actually was physically located hundreds of times on the Blu-ray disc, because they like mathematically determined how far you'd have to seek as you traveled through the different blocked areas of the city. And they realized it was more efficient, rather than have the Blu-ray disc keep going back to that one spot, to just make a copy of it near where it already was. And like, that is like some voodoo, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. It's really, really interesting. It's the opposite of deduplication, right? Which is what you normally want for when you're compressing and storing assets. Mm-hmm. And so hearing him talk about that and saying like, and that changes game design, right?
Right.
Because I think when people say like, oh, it's going to be faster, so one number is bigger than the other, so faster is better. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, that has very little to do with the benefit that it's going to provide. And I think he makes a really compelling case for 3D games that came of age in the PlayStation 1 era, and in the sort of CD-ROM era of PCs, where the level design was such that you had sections and you had paths between, and you always went around the corner to open a new area. And that became part of the philosophy of level design, partly because that was the way you could efficiently store data on a disk, right? Yeah. And so when just to hear him talk about it, and to look at like he shows an old PS1 game, and he shows like an overlaid map, and he's like, games are still designed this way, and saying like, what if we did it what if we did where we weren't restricted by that? And what's funny about it is that indie game designers follow these philosophies even when they themselves, the games they're making, are not constrained by it. It's because they're sort of learning from examples. So that I found that very compelling. And if it's not making a lot of sense as I describe it, dear listeners, go check out the talk and that section of it, because who's to say if a lot of developers will take advantage? The SSD on the PlayStation 5 is actually quite a bit faster than the one that's going to be shipping on the Series X. And so what might end up happening is that cross-platform games are going to be using the least common denominator. So who's to say how many games will take advantage of the actual possibilities of this? But it is kind of exciting, right? Yeah. And I don't make games at that scale, so it's all just sort of like theoretical to me, and part of that is fun too.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing though. It's like they haven't announced any games, and like at the end of the day, most people purchase a console for the game. So like,
not me, but most people.
Yeah. If you they haven't announced anything yet, so it's hard for me to be excited for it.
Yeah.
It's odds are I'm going to get it, because there are a few games on the PS4 that I want to get anyways, that I would like to be able to play, and I don't want to get a PS4 when the PS5 is coming out. possibly this year, maybe next year.
Yeah.
So
knowing that backwards compatibility is there, and Xbox is selling its entire theory on this. They're saying like 100% of everything is going to run. Like they are making that a big selling point, which is part of why it felt like Sony stumbled so much, because they didn't fully explain that, Microsoft set the standard for this. They're like, consoles are PCs now. And so if there's a game of meaning to buy, just like you're saying, like you can buy the next console and just buy PS4 games for it, or Xbox One games for it. And like, that is a perfectly okay to do. And then you're just future proofed, right?
Exactly. So that's what I want to do. But like, I still want to, I don't know, there's not enough games that I'm excited for on the PS4 that I would want to play on the PS5. So I need to see what will be on the PS5 before I'm inclined to buy it, at least within the launch window, you know?
Did they talk about whether the VR like hardware and stuff would work with the PS5?
Yes. They didn't get into a lot of the details, but they were talking about the audio processing, and this sort of came up in that, where the audio processing is a separate chip, and that is how PSVR works. So if you've used PSVR, you plug it into a little box, and then you plug the box into your PlayStation, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to power the box separately. So the Vive works like this too, but the Vive does it just as literally it's a pass-through. Like it doesn't actually do a lot of. It has a Bluetooth radio in it, but it doesn't really do much else. The little PlayStation VR pass-through box actually does audio processing for 3D audio, because the PlayStation 4 would be choked by that. And so the PlayStation 5 has that separate audio processing in the console. So he was saying future PlayStation VR headsets will not require that, which might also mean that they may be cheaper. As an accessory. That's just me speculating, but it's sort of interesting. But yeah, it does seem like it's been a big success for them, so I can imagine that they want to keep that going. As to how much hardware revision they're going to do, because you still have to buy Move controllers, and those came out in 2010. So
it's true. It's
true. They stuck with those. I don't know.
Well, that makes it more compelling to me as well.
Yeah. But like I was saying, like the consumer story is the least interesting part of it to me. Like I'm gonna get one just because I get these things, but like I want to know about them. I want to learn about them. That's the exciting part.
Well, yeah, for sure. Like I don't know that. I don't think that the video. Well, I don't know. I guess it gave the consumer some information. I don't think it was information that Sony fans might have been wanting, because they want to know about the games. That's where people were coming from. Yeah.
And I think actually when the PS4 video did have a little bit more on that front. It wasn't about that, but I think it did tease a little bit more than they did this time. And I think part of it is like no one's ready to announce things. Right. You know? It's like they were waiting for E3, which is also not happening, but that's a story for another time.
Mm-hmm. Well, Sony wasn't even going to be at E3, right? Before this.
That's true. What are they? But they still put on a show, right?
They have the PlayStation Experience thing. They do their own.
But that happens at a different time, right? Or does it happen during E3?
Oh no, it happens at a different time. So maybe I don't know what they were going to do.
Man, so much has happened that these are things like I remember what this is, but like I don't know, it's unimportant information ultimately.
Could be anything.
That's our show. If you liked it, leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app and tell all your friends too. We don't get out as much as we used to, so those messages are very nice to hear. And if you're interested in any of the topics we talked about on the episode, be sure to check out our website, nicegames.club, for more show notes and links to resources. We're making continual updates to the site. It just got a new coat of paint this week, so hopefully you can take another peek at it and see how it's plugging along.
Yeah, if you took a look at it and were like, why is everything like kind of still under construction? Well, now it will look much better. Thanks to Mark.
And now you'll see other things that are still under construction, and now you at least get a sense of the progress of it. And so you know that all those changes are coming in the future. So it's being built. It's being built. But we're all busy right now. Mm-hmm. Like with playtesting our games, we always want to hear feedback on the podcast. You can do that by going to nicegames.club/feedback. Tell us what you think. Steven goes through all those responses, and he's very emotionally invested in them. So if you're going to leave a message, make it a good one. Get in touch with us on Twitter at Nice Games Club, where Dale tweets game dev resources and pictures of cats. Or you can also contact us by email at contact@nicegames.club. Ask us questions and give us suggestions for topics, because we've tooled the show a little differently for this new era we live in. We'd love to try other new things. So send us your ideas. All right. Until we start again, remember to
play nice
and make nice.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. My stomach is being very loud. Just a second.
Oh, okay.
Do you guys hear that?
No,
I didn't hear anything.
Okay, sorry. Can we do that one more time?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, sure.
Say something about mutazione.